With all the talk of the Olympics, you can't get away from it right now. Sports happens to be on our minds. And there's been all this talk about goats. Now, if you don't know what a goat is, it's the greatest of all time. Who is the greatest snow skier? Who is the greatest alpine? Who's the greatest figure skater? Blah, blah, blah. But when they always start talking about them, my mind goes to one of the most forgotten athletes, I think, of all time. I'm talking about a man whose accomplishments, in some cases, have never been equaled. I'm talking about James Francis Thorpe, Jim Thorpe, or Wohotak, as his mother called him, the bright path. Jim Thorpe won the 1922 Olympics with the decathlon and the pentathlon, and he had never competed in track and field before the Olympics. His score in the decathlon has yet to be surpassed. He played professional football. He played professional baseball. He was voted in 1950 as the greatest athlete of the half century. In 2001, ABC's Wild World of Sports declared him the athlete of the 20th century. ESPN lists him as 7th. But he was an amazing person. He accomplished amazing feats, but he did none of this alone. Do you know who his coach was? George Scobie Warner. You might know him better by his common name, Pop Warner. Pop Warner used to be the name of youth football leagues when I was growing up. I don't know if it still is or not. But Pop Warner is also one of the founders of modern day football. This thing called the three-point stance. You might have heard of that in football. He invented that along with another. But it's Pop Warner who's responsible for Jim Thorpe being at the Olympics. He's the one that convinced Jim Thorpe, who had never competed in any field or track athletes before, to try out and ultimately win the Olympics. The King of Sweden proclaimed him when he put on his gold medal that he was the greatest athlete he had ever witnessed or seen. Now, without Pop Warner, there would have been no Jim Thorpe. Isn't that true of all of us? Can't we all look back and identify one person who saw in us what we couldn't see ourselves? A person who developed a relationship with us that became more than a friend, more than a coach, a mentor. I can think of 3 people in my life who have served that role over time. One was my junior high Sunday school teacher. Let's just say that I wasn't the model Sunday school student, shall we? But he took an interest in me. He taught me how to play tennis. I ended up playing high school and college tennis, and I still play to this day when the courts don't have snow on it. But, beside that, he took me. The second was a businessman. I don't know why he took me under his wing, but he did. He was wonderful. He bought me my first real computer, a 286. If you remember those. It was a long time. A 286. But more importantly, he had the ability to cut through all the BS and focus on the one question I needed to ask myself. The one question I was afraid to ask myself. He was laser focused in that ability. And the third was probably the best friend I've ever had. He died about 15 years ago of a brain tumor. And, besides teaching me how to put on a priest collar correctly and how to celebrate the Eucharist so it doesn't sound like you're just saying words, he taught me so much more. To this day, I miss our morning bagel and coffee conversations where we talked about sports, deep theology, and the mundane routines of life, and then also what we might do if either one of us won the lottery. We weren't going to give anything to the other. That was one of the things. But more importantly, he taught me to confront my demons. But even before that, he taught me to admit that I had demons that I needed to confront. All three of those men connected on a very deep and personal level. What about you? But what each of those men did for me wasn't that they just taught me some skills, some talents, and that kind of thing. But each one of them challenged me to be better, to grow, to mature, to set my goals higher and higher, not to rest on my laurels, which is awfully easy to do. Each one of them strove for me to be better, not just at my job or at tennis, but as a person, as a human being. They each challenged me to grow my character. What about you? Who's challenged you to grow in your character, to go farther, to be better? Who is it that you want to be like? Who is your model of success? Let me suggest that our culture doesn't give us very good options at this point. Our culture honors those who are lucky, which is what most wealthy people are. Our culture honors those who pretend to be something they're not, actors and celebrities. And finally, we honor those who won the genetic DNA lottery, and they ended up with a body that can do all kinds of things. Athletes. We don't have the best models. Now, if you want to be wealthy or famous, let me say this clearly. I am judging you. You've set your heights and your goals on things that time and rust will destroy. Our ultimate goal, our purpose in life is to be in union with God, to be in a relationship with God. Everything else is penultimate. But in order to reach that relationship with God, you have to have a mentor. You need someone to kick your butt and take names. Someone who pushes you harder and farther than you ever thought you could go. Not just physically, because that's the easy part. Mentally and spiritually. That's the true test of your courage, your fortitude, your determination, and your grit. It's all up here. So you must choose a mentor. In the Christian tradition, we call those spiritual directors. People who will help us get closer to God. Every Christian, every disciple of Christ needs a spiritual director. Someone who will help you to reach your fulfillment, satisfy your potential as a child of God. It's not an option. You have to have a mentor. One of the interesting things that have changed in our culture, at least as I've witnessed it over time, is the idea of having a mentor or a coach, a spiritual director. Now, for those of us who grew up as baby boomers, we heard this phrase, don't trust anyone over 30. Remember that? Nobody was going to tell me what to do. Nobody was going to tell me how to do it. You're not my boss. Okay? And we lived in a culture that prized youthfulness. In fact, I would suggest that we've made an idol out of youthfulness, especially in the church. Churches all want young people, young families, and I agree with that. But in pursuit of that, we've also lost sight of the wisdom and experience that comes with age and maturity. Now, don't get me wrong, everyone who's old is not mature and wise. Age is not the prerequisite. of maturity and wisdom. Experience is good, but in order for experience to be worthwhile, it has to be reflected on and applied to your life. But I want to say there's a change in our culture. Those who we call millennials want mentors, people they can look up to, who can guide them through the struggles and challenges and opportunities of life, much the same way it happened when we all lived as multi-generations under one roof. In those days, if you had trouble with your parents, and who doesn't, you could go to grandpa or grandma or your favorite aunt and uncle. They were in the same house, and you could complain and you could get advice. Therefore, I want to suggest that not only do you need to have a mentor, you need to be a mentor. You need to have a mentor, and you need to be a mentor. Now, if you're going to be a mentor, there are 3 things you need to do. 3 things. First of all, the relationship is more important than the mentorship. The relationship is more important than teaching them stuff. Otherwise, it becomes a burden or a duty, kind of like the older brother who has to take care of his younger sisters because he has to. Not speaking from personal experience at all. It needs to be someone that you like, that you're comfortable with being in relationship, that you don't see yourself as better or greater. You just like them because they're them and you are you. Second, you have to be more concerned with their character than with developing their skills. Teaching them the things that are important, but what is essential is helping them to become a person of virtue, a person of character. In Christian terms, to grow into the full stature and maturity of Christ, to be the best human being they can be. And the third is the most important. You have to be willing to be honest with them. You have to tell them the hard truths. Point out their gifts, but also their weaknesses. The places where they are emotionally immature. Because you see, you can't become spiritually mature without becoming emotionally mature. The two go together. And that's the toughest one. But it's the most essential. It takes the relationship from being friend to mentor. Telling them the hard truth. But if you're going to be mentored and be a good mentoree, there are 3 things you have to do. First of all, you have to be willing to listen. You have to be willing to listen, not just hear, but hear the hard truths, the hard words that come your way. You have to be willing to hear the things you don't want to hear. Because let me give you a little secret. Everybody else already sees what you think you're hiding. Everybody already knows what you think you're covering up. Second, you must be willing to do the hard work that it takes to grow and mature. It's hard work to become a person of greatness. And as I've said before, you're going to have to say no to many things in order to say yes to becoming the kind of person you want to be. You must be willing to do whatever it takes, wherever it takes, however it takes, even if you don't see its value, even if you don't see the purpose, even if it asks you to go beyond your limits. And third, and this one is the most important, you have to decide you must decide who you really want to be. What kind of person is it that you really want to be? Which means you need to look for a mentor who can follow. You can follow and be like them. You need to find someone that you are so determined that that is the right person that you don't mind being compared to them. Don't mind being said, you're the splitting image of, so to speak. None of that's easy. None of it's quick. It's a lifelong process, and you may never achieve that goal in this side of the grave. However, the real question is not what goals do you achieve, but rather, is the goal worth achieving? Each of us can be a Pop Warner. Each of us might become a Jim Thorpe. Or, more graciously, God may give us a Jim Thorpe to mentor. Someone who will go on farther and faster than we've ever thought. That would be wonderful, and that should be our prayer. You see, the Mount of Transfiguration presents us with the real models of success and who we need to be. You got a choice. You could be Moses, you could be Elijah, or you could be Jesus. It's a lot different than the choices our culture gives us. So as we begin our Lenten journey this Wednesday, I want to ask you, who is or will be your mentor? Who is or will be someone you mentor? Those are two of the most important questions that a disciple, a follower of Jesus, can ask. But even more, who will be your model of success? Moses, Elijah, or Jesus? It's your choice. Choose wisely. Let us stand and affirm our faith in the words of the Nicene Creed, found on page 358 of the Book of Common Prayer.